Coming up next on This Week in Radio Tech, Scott Fybush. He's a stand-up guy in both senses of the word. You're going to want to find out what we're talking about. Also, a big trip down Route 66, translator interference issues. That's a topic we're talking about. And KTNN. What a nice station. We talked about that, too. It's all coming up next on TWiRT. This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Broadcasters General Store with outstanding service, savings, and support online at bgs.cc. By the Ruby console from Lavo. See Lavo in your future at lavo.com/TWiRT. By Angry Audio. Audio problems disappear when you get angry at angryaudio.com. And by the CalRec Type R console system. Type R is a brand new, modular, expandable IP-based radio system from CalRec Audio. Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech, the show where we talk about everything from the microphone to the light bulb at the top of the tower and all the digital and analog stuff in between. You know, it's been a lot of digital the last few years, although once in a while we touch on analog. Hey, we got a good show today. I am so excited because every once in a while, we can get this guy's attention to be our guest for an hour. I'll get to him in just a second. First of all, I'm Kirk Harnack. I'm in the Telos Alliance studio. You know how I know that? Because it says that right there. Telos Alliance studio in Nashville, Tennessee. My office also. And I thank the Telos Alliance for making possible some of the equipment around here and the time to do This Week in Radio Tech. So check them out at telosalliance.com. Really appreciate that. Thanks a lot to my boss, Cam and Marty and Frank Fody and Tom and everybody else who helps make this possible. Scott, too. All right. Now that we got all that out of the way, let's head over to my co-host. And he's in. He real quickly set up a studio. It looks beautiful. Chris, where are you?
I'm actually in our news production studio here at the radio station. So we've got actually behind me. I don't know how well this will show up. Let's have some fun, right? Why not? Let's see if this works. Oh, you can't see him. But back there in the talk studio, we have Christian McBride, who's currently recording Jazz Night in America. And then the studio after that is Michael Bourne doing Singers Unlimited for Sunday morning. And then in the next booth after that is a person doing the checkout recording. So it's been a busy afternoon. Actually, the last couple of days been busy.
And it's a little hard to see the meters, but it looks like you are actually on that board. That mic is going through the board and then over to your laptop, right?
Yeah, no, it's definitely, I can, let's see. Can you see the button here?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that turns you off, yes.
Blah, 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 blah. There you go.
That looks like a PRE console, is it?
Yes, it is a PRE console, Radio Mixer 28.
That would be an analog console. See, once in a while, we do talk about analog here on the show.
Yeah. This plant is an analog plant, except for the AES audio that we use primarily for the music and microphones. That's it.
Good deal. All right. Hey, well, let's without further ado bring our guest in because he's got a lot to say. And our guest is Scott Fybush.
He always does.
Scott, welcome in. Glad you're here. Scott, your mic's doing it again. Go percussively adjust it again. Scott, you're going to be talking about some of your usual stuff that you deal with, Northeast Radio and Towers and your annual summer trip and the calendar. And am I giving it all away yet?
Oh, not entirely.
Okay.
But yes, the new Tower site calendar. We can get to that first, maybe. It is on the way. It is in production. Lisa sometimes has joined us as the production manager. She's out running some errands right now, but she assures me it will be ready in a few weeks. We just started taking pre-orders at fybush.com, and not going to spoil the surprises yet about what towers are in there, but there are some good ones again this year.
Well, there always are good towers. And my catalog calendar, excuse me, catalog, my calendar, because they're not for sale. Well, maybe some of them are for sale, but they're not for sale through your calendar. I enjoy mine every year, and I'm proud to get it every year. Scott, I hope you're not offended. I don't order the autographed copy. Just don't have much money. I can't afford your autograph.
Dirty little secret. You can always catch me at a show, and I'll still sign it for you.
Oh, now there's an idea. I'd feel like I was scamming, though. I'd feel like I was, meeting my doctor at a golf game and then asking him medical questions.
I'll even give you advice on translator interference issues for free. It may not be worth anything, but I'll give you the advice.
That's another topic, translator interference. And that's been a hot topic in the last few days. And then there's one more topic you're going to talk about, and it does have to do with the word stand-up. And so I'm just eager to hear about that. And maybe we can, toward the end of the show, get a little taste of that if you're willing, but we haven't paid a cover charge. So
we can do that.
Our show, This Week in Radio Tech, is brought to you in part by our friends at Broadcasters General Store and the Innovonics Aaron 655. We'll be right back.
The Aaron 655 is the latest addition to the Innovonics family of rebroadcast receivers, designed specifically for FM broadcast translators, also referred to as relay transmitters. The Aaron 655 is unique as an uncompromising DSP-based HD radio and FM receiver combined with a powerful 3-band audio processor and dynamic RDS encoder. IP connectivity adds streaming capabilities, and a web browser interface gives you total remote control of the unit from any PC or mobile device. The Aaron 655 gives you maximum flexibility for program sources. Select program audio from analog FM, digital channels HD1 through 8, streaming sources, and analog or AES digital line inputs, all with assignable failover audio backup. The internal RDS encoder allows you to customize your RDS messaging. You can use incoming off-air RDS data, convert HD radio pad data to RDS, convert streamed metadata to RDS, or receive IP telnet data. Comprehensive audio processing includes gated and windowed AGC, a unique syllabic leveler, 3 bands of compression, and both wideband and independent HF limiting. Easy setup is achieved by using 10 factory presets and 10 customizable presets. The processor also supports day parting, allowing automatic preset changes to follow different programming formats throughout your broadcast day. The front panel has an OLED display and jog wheel with intuitive menus for easy setup, advanced control, and editing for all operating parameters. The Aaron 655 dynamic web interface gives you total remote control of the unit from any PC or mobile device. A comprehensive set of menus includes a quick overview of now playing info, input-output control, processor options, RDS encoder, alarms and notifications, SNMP settings, and much more. You can also listen to the live audio broadcast streamed through the web interface.
And of course, the Aaron 655 from Innovonics is available from our sponsor, Broadcasters General Store, on the web at bgs.cc, or give them a call at 352-622-7700. I think I memorized that number years ago. They do a great job there at Broadcast General Store, 352-622-7700. You'll enjoy talking to them. And hey, I was talking to Scott earlier about this Aaron 655. Scott, you hear great things about it in the circles that you run in, I hear.
I do. I've been doing a whole bunch of translator work lately. And one of the big questions whenever you get anything over the air is, how do you get a good, reliable signal that you can rebroadcast cleanly? And there are not a lot of good answers out there. There were some other products that have come and gone. There are some that have enormous price tags in order to do what you need. But if the goal is just to grab something really cleanly over the air and be able to rebroadcast it, it's the answer. It is. I've had a lot of friends and clients who have had success with it, and they make good stuff there.
And not to go on and on about it, but I bet Chris can weigh in for a second. Chris, you've seen a demo of the Aaron 655 of its FM tuner, I believe, and it's amazing what it can do in the with not co-channel, but with adjacent channel interference. It seems like the guys at Innovonics really understand how to make a tuner that just grabs a signal out of the air in the face of a lot of stuff nearby.
Well, yeah, we talked to them at their booth at the NAB, and I believe, if I remember correctly, the front end of that receiver has some nice serious filtering that gives a nice clean, image rejection, spurious emissions. What else you have to look out for? Blocking frequencies. So it does a nice job of carving out whichever frequency you select to make sure that it captures it properly as an FM, capture limiting it requires, and it really works out nice. And I've actually just had a chance to play with one. I actually help a friend set it up at his station for a small FM, and It's exactly as advertised. I have to say, playing with it on the NAB floor, then actually doing it in a transmitter room on a location in real world environment. It was sweet. And as Scott pointed out, it's definitely made by people who get it and understand. And he's right. There have been many that have come and gone. Some with very large price tags. But the Innovonics approach, and I've talked to some of their folks on staff there, and their approach is definitely more in line with their customers, broadcasters.
In fact, it can be used for translators, and it picks up HD2, for example. And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about today is translator interference issue. And Scott, I'm not sure I really fully understand what's going on here. I haven't had time to read all about it. Maybe you can kind of bring us up to speed on. And boy, so many broadcasters are now depending on translators to either to fill in or to get their HD2 out on the FM dial, or to get their AM station out on the AM dial. Tell us what's going on in the news lately.
Absolutely. I'm not sure at this point that anybody 100% understands this, because one of the big questions, where's my printer going there? One of the big questions is, how is the FCC actually going to interpret the rules that it puts down on paper? So we've established from the beginning of the translator service that a translator is supposed to be secondary to a full power broadcaster, right? Mm-hmm. And so the rules have always said that a translator cannot interfere with, and I believe the language is, regularly used off-air reception of a broadcast signal. And it was not a big deal when translators were little 1-watt things up on mountaintops, and there were maybe a few hundred of them in the whole country. As translators have become 250-watt kind of quasi-primary signals in big cities, operating a lot of times, on second adjacents to locals and with contours that butt right up against a full power, this has been a much bigger issue. And so the FCC has been going through a whole rulemaking proceeding to try to sort out, okay, what does this language actually mean? How can we interpret it? And so they came out a few months ago, and it has just finally made its way now through the whole Federal Register process, and now has the force of commission rules, if not law, for how you figure this out. And so what they have established for the first time is, okay, there is a boundary within which they will presume that a translator interference complaint is valid. And the number they came up with, they didn't pull it totally out of thin air, but it was arbitrary, is to say, okay, the primary station's 45 dBu contour is the contour within which we will consider interference to be a legitimate possibility, which was controversial, for translators. If I have my translator consultant hat on, we want to be able to put a translator right up against the protected contour of a station. And so if it's a Class A station or a Class C station where the protected contour is 60 dBu, in theory, I can put the 40 dBu of my co-channel translator right up against that contour. Well, now the FCC is saying, wait a minute, yeah, we would allow you to do that, and we'll give you a construction permit for that. But in the real world, if there are listeners in between the 60 that you're protecting and the 45 that we've now designated as worthy of protection, your translator is now going to have to remediate valid interference complaints within that contour. So on the one hand, you can say, okay, this creates a bigger problem for translators. On the other hand, they are not making it at all simple for full power stations to file these complaints, because there's a provision in there that now says you can't do it just on the basis of 1 or 2 complaints like you could once do. You have to have a certain number of complaints, and it varies depending on the population within the primary station's contour. So it can be anywhere from, I think, 5 or 6 for a really sparsely populated station up to, I think it's 26 is the largest minimum that you need if you're, a station in, let's say, New York or LA or Chicago complaining about a translator. And it changes the amount of documentation that you need. And so you now have to do a ratio study at every single location where you've got an interference complaint. However, you do not now have to be able to contact the complainant. And that was another issue that was having some issues on both sides, really, is that you had full power stations that were going out and soliciting complaints, and they've clarified how you can do that now. You're allowed to go on the air and say, hey, are you getting interference? Good, here's how you file a complaint. But the translator operator used to be able then to reach out to these people. And there were stories in some cases of some translator operators literally going around and knocking on people's doors, and supposedly, if you believe some of the stories that are going out, actually threatening some of these complainants to try to get them to drop their complaints. And I'm not saying some of this was happening in New Jersey, but stuff like this happens in New Jersey, if you know what I mean. So it was turning into a little bit of the wild Northeast out there. And the commission didn't want that to continue to be the case. And so now you do not have to directly contact the translator complainant anymore. It's really much more a process now of negotiation between the translator, the full power station, and the FCC. But this is all so new that we haven't really seen any of these make their way completely through the process yet. And so there's going to be a lot of kind of feeling our way around and watching the initial commission decisions and figuring out, okay, here's the precedent that they're setting with these to give us a sense now of how to pursue these on both sides going through. And I should say, in the interest of disclosure, that I've had clients on both sides of these issues. I've put translators on for stations that have then gotten full power stations on the co-channel complaining. And I have also worked with clients who are full power stations who have had translators come on interfering with them. So, as with many of us, I've seen this from both sides.
Wow, man, that is a lot of info to digest. And complicated rule. It's when you were describing, those are just this many people need to come. What's that?
Those are just the cliff notes to it, too.
Oh, gee, man. That your population determines how many people have to complain before the FCC will listen to it. Oh, my goodness. I'm just thinking, can't we all just get along? Wow. If there's some way
that got modified, by the way. That got modified. The initial proposal was they wanted up to 65 complainants. And so you could have a situation where, you could have a translator right at the outer edge of, let's say, a Chicago station signal. Mm-hmm. And because there might be 5 million people inside the 54 dBU of a Class B signal, you would have had 65 complaints, even just in that little corner of the signal. And there was some pushback during the comment process. And I'm here to say, by the way, the FCC listens to those comments in situations like this. I know I've seen my comments get footnoted in their reports and orders, and so they do get listened to. And there was pushback on that, and the commission did respond.
Do you think that requiring a number of complainants is to reduce the possibility of malicious complaints?
I think that's one piece of it. I think they're also trying to establish that, okay, you know what, if you're a Class B station in a big market or even a Class C station, if you are reaching 10 million people with your signal, you shouldn't just be able to say, gee, one person is getting interfered with, therefore we got to shut this translator down. That could be the lifeline that's keeping somebody else alive in a smaller market 50 miles away.
Chris Tobin, you're in the middle of the place where it is or isn't. Does your station operate any translators or is affected by translators at this point?
No. At the moment, we do not operate any translators, nor are we impacted by any of them. So we're in good shape. But there are plenty of translators here in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Long Island area, and there's a lot of activity out there on the band.
Scott, do you want to speculate on where this is going to go? How has the well, you said there's some things we don't know about how the FCC is going to handle this or treat it.
Right.
What's the next step, if any way, or if anything, or just sit back and wait?
Well, there are a couple of things. I mean, first of all, one of the other provisions that I should have mentioned here, because again, it's a big, complicated mess of a ruling. One of the provisions now, it used to be that if you had an interference issue with a translator, you had to solve it as a minor change. So if you are on, let's say, 98.3, you can go 3 channels down all the way to 97.7. You could go 3 channels up all the way to 98.9. You could go to an IF channel, and I picked a really bad example because there's no IF channel you can go to. From 98.3, you go plus or minus 10.7. You're out of the band in either direction. But you could go to an IF channel, and in some cases you were able to mitigate that way. But the more the dial has filled up, that got harder and harder to do.
Sure.
And so one of the gifts that the FCC gave to translator operators was to say, you know what? You can now do a minor change to any channel if you can show that you're remediating interference. And I actually thought there would be more of a land rush on this. Mm-hmm. This all took effect, I want to say it was middle of August, I think, like August 13th, thereabouts. when these new rules kicked in. And I thought there would be a land rush in the first few days of stations realizing, hey, we're stuck in this bad position on 97.7. Maybe there was another thing that was interfering that's moved in the meantime, and now we could go to 102.3. And I thought there'd be a rush of these. There have been a few. The FCC, as best I can tell, hasn't acted on any yet. But I thought there would be more. There may yet be more. If people are interested in exploring it with their translators, I'm certainly happy to give clients some assistance with that too at fybushmedia.com. But I think we're going to see more of that, and I think that we're going to see now in the next few months, some new complaints getting filed under these rules, and we'll see how the FCC deals with those. And I think the other piece that we'll look for is now, what does the FCC do with some of these complaints that have been sitting and lingering under the old rules that somehow they still have to deal with? And my inclination right now would be to defer to my communications lawyer friends about exactly how those now are going to be handled, because I know there's still some question, I think, about how the FCC is going to process stuff that is still in the hopper from before.
So we got a few other topics to talk about. One of them we're going to save for after the break, and that is you took your annual trip across the country and went down Route 66, and you saw one really interesting studio having to do with a Navajo Indian nation. Anyway, we're going to get to that. I don't want to get to that yet. I want to get to that later. But one thing I do want to talk about, kind of related to translators, as long as we're talking about translators, it would be towers. Scott, you and I talked about this on the phone, and I've traveled mostly in the Midwest, and Chris Tobin, of course, like you, mostly up in the Northeast. But I'm curious as you travel across the country, what differences you see in tower either design or, more likely, tower brand for given sizes of towers. And I'll start out by saying that here in Kentucky, Southern Illinois, Indiana, the Boot Heel of Missouri, Arkansas, Mississippi, and Tennessee, all places where I've tended to work a lot, for older stations, AM stations, we tend to see a lot of the old Windcharger brand towers. And these just look like a bunch of bent metal, that's all riveted together and then bolted at sections. Really hard to climb, hurts your feet a lot. So you got to wear some shoes that are really stiff on the bottom. And some of them were four-sided towers with 4 guy wires at each level. Anyway, that's my little bit story, because I don't know if they were completely nationwide or regional. But Scott, what have you noticed, if anything, about tower construction and maybe age across the country?
Well, first of all, those Windchargers definitely got around. And of course, if you look at the name of them, there's a reason they were called Windcharger, because the company didn't start making radio towers. As far as I understand, they started making windmills. And it makes sense that there were a lot of them in the Midwest because they showed up on farms, and you'd have the windmill on top of it, and be powering your water pump or what have you. And so that was kind of a natural move for them. Certainly because stuff was expensive to ship, there was a tendency, I think, to stick with the vendors who were relatively nearby where they were. So Trusscon, for instance, which was out of Youngstown, Ohio, as I recall, you'd see a lot of them in the Northeast because that was easy for them to ship. Blawnox, which was out of the Pittsburgh area, if I'm not mistaken. You'd see a lot of those around that area too. It certainly was sort of an era thing. The Windchargers seemed to be really big. You think of all those AM stations that all started up or that put up vertical towers right around just after World War II. And just as there was the baby boom, there was really kind of an AM station boom too. Stations moving from a local channel to a regional and putting up a 3 or 4 tower DA, that sort of thing, which means all of a sudden there are a lot of these sites around the country that are all sort of hitting that 70, 75 year mark right around the same time. And unless they've been really well maintained over the years, that can start to be troublesome. Obviously, with the taller towers, with TV uses, we have companies like Dresser Idaco that was so big with that stuff in the early 60s, for instance. We're seeing now as everybody's going through repack, and I think we hit the Phase 5 repack deadline. I think that's tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. Those are aging out now too, and you're seeing a number of those starting to get replaced. On the other hand, if they've been cared for over the years, we have the oldest TV tower here in Rochester, which was the old WHAM-TV. That just hit 70 years. this year in 1949, and it's still less than a mile from me. If the trees didn't have the leaves on them, I could show you right out my window here where that tower is up on Pinnacle Hill. It's still going strong. So it's not, it's not automatic. The bigger threat still with a lot of these is the land value underneath them. And that's what happened to WBBM in Chicago over the summer as they gave up the site that they had been at since, 1941, thereabouts, and moved over to Diplex on their sister station on 670. So, thus far, the collapse is not the determining factor for a lot of these. It's much more the underlying land value or the need with TV to put a lot more on it than you can handle structurally these days, which is a long way around to saying there are a lot of different types out there. And if you've seen one tower, you've seen one tower.
Chris Tobin, you're up in Scott Fybush's neighborhood almost. Other end of New York, I suppose. What do you notice about towers? I would think that you notice quite a different variety of towers just in the New York City area, because broadcast has been going on for so long, and there's been just a lot of experimentation from Armstrong's place just up the road there. What are your thoughts on towers and age and such?
Well, the Alpine Tower, Alpine, New Jersey, where Armstrong did his testing, and the pictures of him on the cross arms. That tower is definitely a classic. There are some AM towers around the area that are quite old. I can't name all of the brands, but when you see them, you recognize that as something that's definitely an oldie. That's something that's a classic. But a lot of the towers in the area, some of them have been replaced. I mean, and some have come down. And we have a lot of folks on building tops now. A lot of even out on Long Island, there's one building, I think on the Queens-Nassau County line that has an FM station on it. And that's the kind of stuff downstate where I am from Scott, to be proper. And it's pretty wild. There is some old stuff. There are some old towers running around, but as Scott pointed out, if you maintain them, you can get good 70, 100 years out of them. Depending on where you are and the weather environments and who's maintained it. But it's a dying art. I will say that. I don't see too many new towers going up.
I think we've all seen the pictures from on the various broadcast groups, maybe on Facebook or elsewhere. Tom Ray tends to see a lot of small and middle-sized stations these days as he does inspections and some consulting work. But it's sad when we see AM towers that are covered with vines and suffering from rust. And maybe even a tree has grown around a guy wire. We tend to see that kind of thing, and that's that's what tends to bring towers down, if not ice and inclement weather. It's a business that's failing, that can't take care of the broadcast towers anymore. So, Scott, on your travels, which we'll get to after the break, is that something that you saw? Did you see a lot of decay in towers?
There is definitely decay out there. And, it's a tough thing. If you're a radio station that maybe now is in a small town and you're lucky in some cases, if you're bringing in $150,000, $200,000 a year, all of a sudden, if you've got to allocate even $5,000 a year to keep a crew out there, to keep your grounds clear and to keep the base of the tower clear, that might be an expense you don't want to go to. And of course, if most people are listening to your translator, and maybe it's sitting on a cell phone tower or on a building rooftop and it's not even on your AM, I can understand for some owners out there now why they might look at it and say, why am I spending money on this? Let's just let it sit there and do what it's doing. And if at some point, if it comes down, we'll live with it. And of course, it's an issue too, weather. Chris is absolutely right. If you're down, especially where he is, and you're right by the ocean, you have all the corrosive effects of salt air on a tower. That certainly ages it faster than it would if you're, somewhere out in a drier part of the Midwest, let's say. And then the ground system, which of course is the other part of the AM antenna that you don't necessarily see. In a lot of cases, you've still got ground radials that may have been put in 70 or 75 years ago. And, do you want to believe that there's still intact copper in the ground? I'm not sure I would in all of these cases. And do you want to go to the expense of trenching new copper in there on a signal that maybe isn't your primary signal anymore? It's a tough thing to justify. And it's another reason I think the FCC is going to, at some point, as part of its AM revitalization, have to deal with some of these questions too about minimum AM antenna efficiency and, whether broadcasters might be allowed to use a less efficient antenna that might require a little bit less steel in the air, for instance, if it allows them to keep a station on the air that wouldn't be able to stay on otherwise.
There is some hope on that topic on down the road, and we've got a guest coming up. Grady Moats is going to be our guest in a few weeks, talking about the HEBA, the high efficiency broadcast antenna. This is that design that we all got excited about 15, 20 years ago and then seemed to disappear. Well, Grady and his team seem to have absolutely perfected and proven it. But I can't give away too much because that's about all I know. But
I'm just going to say, without stealing Grady's thunder, I have seen one of the demo installations, and I have nowhere near the level of high math skills that somebody like Grady does to really understand all the inner workings of it. But driving around, listening to the signal, it seemed to do what it proposes to do. And I'll leave it at that. Yep. Let Grady take it from there because there's a lot to talk about there. And I'm excited to that one. He's going to have an article in Radio World too, if I'm not mistaken, if it's not already there. But so we're anyway. He's coming up in a future episode. Hey, you are listening or watching This Week in Radio Tech, our show every week where we talk about radio technology and everything from like I say the antenna, the microphone to the antenna at the top of the tower or the light bulb. I got something to show you here. You're very familiar with these. I'm showing on the screen here some XLR connectors. These are a couple of male XLR connectors. That's not so big. What they're connected to on the other side, though, let's see if we follow this wire and follow it and follow it and follow it. I got 6 feet of wire here. And on the other end is, look at that, a beautiful RJ45 connector that is perfectly molded. It won't pull apart, and it's gold-plated. And it's going to sit there. It's going to plug into some AOIP device, and it's going to sit there and carry audio for years and years reliably. Dan Braverman years ago invented this idea of putting audio over Cat5, and it turned out that analog audio or AES-3 audio works very well over Cat cable. Well, now that the folks that made Studio Hub have shut their doors, radio systems, Angry Audio is making fully compatible adapter cables. These are from Angry Audio, but you know what? They're made in the same factory by the same people and basically the same molds. That's right. All your favorite connectors, whether they're female XLR or male XLR to a female RJ45 or to a male RJ45 at the end of a cable, either way, you got your whole selection here of these cables. So you should check out the folks at Angry Audio. Go to angryaudio.com, and they've even got a free deal for you at angryaudio.com. If you'll, and right there's the cables that have the male RJ45 at the other end, and you can get these in stereo or mono cables, bare wires at one end. Just all different kinds of arrangements there. We've put the camera back on me. If you will get this, one of these adapters right here, the kind that's short that has the female RJ45 connector on it, right now Angry Audio has a special deal, and that is they'll give you a free 7-foot Cat5 patch cable, already terminated on the ends with gold-plated RJ45 connectors. If you buy, for every one of these you buy, you get a free 7-foot RJ45 cable. So that can save you some money right there from buying a bunch of RJ45, a bunch of Cat5 cables. There you go. So check it out, angryaudio.com. I really appreciate Mike Dosh and the people at Angry Audio for bringing you this deal, these adapter cables that the industry has been missing or was scared of for a couple of weeks. Oh my gosh, they're gone. No, they're here. The same factory, same people making them under the Angry Audio name, angryaudio.com. All right. Our show is also brought to you by CalRec. We'll be right back.
Type R is CalRec's first native IP-based mixing console. It is fully AES-67 and NMOS ISO4 and ISO5 compatible as defined by SMPTE 2110. Connectivity via Cat5e utilizing COT switches and power to the surface is supplied via standard PoE switches to minimize cabling. Its 2U core has integrated I/O, so you're instantly up and running, and it can power up to 3 independent mixing environments, each with their own separate DSP resources. Type R's surface is modular and expandable, consisting of 3 slimline panels, each of which are user-definable with layouts saved and recalled quickly between shows. It's available in 4 DSP packs, and as your station grows, larger packs can be added, making Type R the most flexible radio console you can buy. Find out more at calrec.com/TWiRT.
Thanks a lot to CalRec for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. calrec.com/TWiRT. All right, it's Kirk Harnack along with Chris Tobin in a beautiful New Jersey studio in Newark. And Scott Fybush is with us too. Chris, I couldn't help but notice during one of the last times you were on camera, there's a lot of activity going on the other side of the glass. You got a real radio station there, don't you?
Yes, we do.
Caught him off guard. What? This real radio station?
Sorry about.
Hope he's okay. It's okay. It's all right.
Yep.
Chris, next we're going to talk to Scott about his vacation. Yes, Scott brought us about 120 vacation slides to show. No. Scott, what do you do this every year? You take a big
hour and a half.
That's right. Scott, you take a big vacation every year. You go driving and visit places. How does a family feel about visiting tower sites?
They are tolerant within a limited scope. My daughter is, she's about to turn 16, and there are things that, for the most part, she would probably rather do. On the other hand, she's also interested in starting a radio show, so I can't complain too much about her right now, because that's kind of a cool thing that I'm excited about. But we did a family trip this year. We had to be out west for some family stuff at the beginning of July. And my son, who is 11, is just fascinated by Route 66. And I think you can blame Disney and the Cars movies for that, because they really kind of created that mythology for a whole new generation.
Oh, yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah. And so he was determined to see as much Route 66 as we could. And so I said, okay, we can work this out, where we spent some time in Southern California. We went to Disneyland. And then got on Route 66, and we drove up through Arizona and then into New Mexico. I took them, the kids had never been through Vegas, and so we detoured off 66, basically long enough so I can show them, hey, here's where Daddy disappears to 2 weeks every April. And I drove them by the convention center and said, you think I'm having fun here? You see this enormous building? I don't leave here for a week. This is where I live.
For a week, that's right.
And all I do is I walk around and I have conversations with people about equipment and about technology and about buying and selling radio stations. And so they,
you talk to Kirk Harnack and Chris Tobin too while you're there. We're all there.
Exactly. Everybody is. It's where the neighborhood is. But no, so then we hit the interesting parts of Route 66. We went to the Grand Canyon and ended up in Albuquerque. My daughter and Lisa are both huge Breaking Bad fans. They wanted to take the tour around Albuquerque and see all the shooting locations. That was actually really kind of neat. But I said, look, there's one thing I want to do on the way here. Because when I was out in Vegas in April, my friend Tom Langmeyer, who's the former general manager of WTMJ in Milwaukee and WGN in Chicago, and has his own company now, Great Lakes Broadcasting, that he's getting started. He had gone right after NAB out to Window Rock, Arizona, and had visited the new studios of the Navajo radio stations there, KTNN AM and Capital Country, which is now on 2 FM signals there. And I was looking at his pictures that he was sending me, I think while I was still stuck in Vegas, and said, I got to get there. I want to go see these. I had been out there, it was 2011. I had been out there and visited, and they were operating out of kind of a dumpy building that had been converted from something else, and it got the job done. And that was about all you could say about it. It got the job done. But I said, listen, I want to spend an afternoon, and I want to go visit and meet the new general manager there, a guy named Troy Little. And I really want to see these stations. And let me tell you, out there, in the hub of Navajo Nation, it's actually, I think the town is St. Michael's, Arizona, where they are now. They have built one of the nicest small market broadcast facilities that you will ever see.
I was just looking at their website for KTNN, and I hadn't seen pictures yet. Where can we? Oh, let's see. Where can we see pictures of KTNN? Did you take any? Did you take any?
I did. They will be up pretty soon as part of Site of the Week on Fybush.com. I'm kind of working my way through a backlog of pictures there. But those will be going up, I think, in the next couple of months. I can give you kind of a verbal preview of what you'll see because what they have built, they built it from the ground up. They brought in professional designers, and I apologize off the top of my head, I can't think of which designers they used. But it's all audio over IP. I believe, if I remember right, you're not going to like me saying this, but it's SAS. I think that's in there now. But it's everybody makes their valid choices about what's out there. But it is just a beautifully designed facility. KTNN is a 50,000 watt directional AM station. Because it has to protect, they're on 660. So, of course, they have to protect, I was going to say WNBC, WFAN in New York. And so they got a big notch in their signal sort of to the north and east. So they got a full power FM a few years ago that helps fill in the northern part of the reservation with a second signal. And this is, I don't know about you, when I am out west and I'm within range of that 660 signal, I'll turn it on as I'm driving around at night because sometimes they're playing country music, sometimes they're playing pop music. And then sometimes at night, they'll go into these long blocks of, half an hour of Navajo tribal chants. And there's nothing like it anywhere else on the radio. And they're also this lifeline into an area that still, even now, does not really have great two-way connectivity in some of the more remote areas. And so they are still the messenger that can get the word out, to people. Hey, if if Joe is listening out on this end of the reservation, please contact your niece. She needs to reach you about something, or your prescription is ready. It's really granular one-to-one radio communication in a way that we're not used to, and it is completely bilingual. They will slide right back and forth between English and Navajo. They broadcast in the past. They've done Phoenix Suns games in Navajo. I think they've done some football games in Navajo, and so it's keeping the language alive. And then they have two commercial FM stations that do a country format that when I had been up there in 2011 were mostly just satellite and voice tracked. And those are now local too. And I actually ended up on the air for about 20 minutes with their afternoon host on Capital Country. And we were talking about what we were going to go eat for lunch and the joys of Navajo fry bread and green chili burgers. I'm getting hungry again just thinking about it from the wrong end of the country. But it's that kind of communication. And they, everybody on the reservation is listening to them. And they have a really solid advertiser base. And the studios are beautiful. They are so nicely done. I can't even begin to tell you just the architecture in them. You kind of know where you are. There's a sense of place to it that you don't always get anymore looking at radio facilities. And it's designed for the kind of broadcasting they do. And so especially on KTNN, they do a lot of issue-oriented talk programming. And so they built it with a sizable talk studio where they can bring people in to talk about whatever the issues are. And I think they've got room for 4 or 5 people around a table, and they can go, go live from in there, or they can record. And they're setting it all up now in addition, as you have to with any radio studio anymore. Nobody's just a radio studio, right? And so they're getting it all set up now where they can do video from there, and they can, they can have lighting in there, they can have streaming. And by the way, it is all beautifully set up for emergency preparedness too. It's fully generator backed up. They've got space set out. They've got some extra expansion space where if people need to stay there, if there's an emergency, they can roll out the cots. They've got showers. It really, every little bit of it was just completely thought out.
Wow. I'm eager to see that. Will it be coming up on Fybush.com?
It will be coming up on Fybush.com. And in the meantime, on my Top of the Tower podcast, there's an interview that's up there now with Troy Little. That was one of the interviews that I did. And we didn't do it at the station. We went out. There's a little Navajo tribal mall about 1.5 miles east of the station. And he said, hey, let's go get lunch. And we went into one of the little restaurants there and got the green chili burger and the fry bread. And we sat outside and I had a chat with him about his radio station. And you get to hear kind of the background of the flea market that was going on in the background there. And that was kind of cool too, just to get to talk to him there. Also had the chance to visit and talk with Saul Levine, who's the owner
yeah.
of
Yeah,
everybody knows Saul, right? Go Country and KSUR in Los Angeles. He is, I believe, now 92 years old, and he is still going so strong with this radio station that he has owned since 1959. And we had a 2-part conversation that's also up on my podcast page at Fybush.com about his early days in radio and what he thinks of the medium now. He's still very bullish on AM radio and on the value of AM stations. So that too was worth talking to. And let me tell you, he was taking me around the station and charging up and down stairwells, and he was moving faster than I was.
I was just, I've followed him around a little bit too. And if I'm ever at a restaurant with him, he's going to order first, and I'm going to say, I'll have whatever he's having. Because that guy's amazing for in his 90s. Wow. Chris, I guess you know.
I left with a bottle of red from his winery. It was great. Yeah.
Well, maybe that's the secret. Chris, you know Saul Levine, yeah?
I know, I know of him. I know who he is. Yeah, I think we met once. That was about it.
Yeah, he's a man. That guy's a blowtorch. He's just, you know, what a ball of energy. Scott, you mentioned your podcast, Top of the Tower, and I've heard of this before. Tell me and Chris a little bit about that.
So Top of the Tower has been going for, I want to say, close to 2 years now. It's not quite on the exact weekly schedule like you guys do, but then again, there's only one of me, right? But basically, whenever I have something interesting to talk about or somebody interesting to talk to, I'm using it in part as a chance to have conversations with people while they are still around to have their stories told. We are losing way too fast some of the pioneers of this business, which is one of the reasons I was really so eager to get together with Saul and to spend time talking with him. But I also will go around during conventions and talk to people on the show floor. And so I think I've talked to you guys before, as I recall, and talked to various vendors out at NAB. I'm headed out to the radio show in Dallas. Hopefully see you guys there in about 2.5 weeks now.
Yeah.
So looking forward to talking to people there. Jeff Williams at Yellow Tech. One of the things I'm looking forward to trying out. He said, wait a minute, you're running around carrying a wired microphone. I've got my little Marantz digital recorder. He said, wait a minute, you got to try one of my IXM all-in-one digital mics. I just got one of those from
cool.
him and looking. Yeah, it's a neat device. I'm looking forward to really putting that to the test. I'll have that out in Dallas and have a chance to interview people with that. But it's a chance to kind of get out there in more than just print. And I am at heart a print guy, even though I work on the air and I've worked on TV before, back when I still had the Kirk Harnack head of hair to play with. They don't let me on so much anymore for some reason. I don't know what that's about. But,
that'd be the Chris Tobin head of hair. Look at Chris's hair.
Yeah.
I mean, he's going to take the top spot here.
No, there is no hair like Harnack hair. I'm not letting you wiggle out.
Well, thank goodness there's only one. Oh, man.
So it's an opportunity to put some voices to what I do, and occasionally to play some air checks and hear stations as they're transitioning, and hoping to do more of that. My dream interview right now, I don't know if you had a chance to see the Quentin Tarantino movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. That came out over the summer. Oh, it was fantastic, in part because the whole thing is woven through. The entire soundtrack is air checks from KHJ from this era in 1969 that he's portraying. And I'm trying to find a way to get his music supervisor on the line to talk to her. I've seen some interviews in print with her about how they found these air checks and about using radio as part of this movie. Because if you love that era of top 40 radio, you got to go see that movie. It was fantastic.
Was that like the Boss Radio era?
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Wow.
And he got, Tarantino's all about those details. And so a lot of the movie, nothing happens except these guys, it's Brad Pitt driving around LA, right? And you see in the background on the bench backs and whatever, you see ads for KHJ and for KTTV channel 11 and all of that. It was so perfectly done. There was not one detail that I could point to and say, wait a minute, they got that wrong, because they didn't. They got it all right. And that's rare in a movie about radio.
So we've got one more topic I know of to talk about, but before we get to that, Chris, do you have any? Have we left the stone unturned? There's something that you'd like to ask Scott about?
Well, I'm just curious. I've been involved in some of the TV repack here in New York City at One World Trade Center. In your travels, how has the repack been? How from the beginning to where we are today with that was Repack 5, Deadline 5. What have you noticed, observed, or just sheer curiosity? Because some of the conversations I've had with folks and what I'm learning about the ATSC 3.0 and where things could go, and how some TV groups are embracing and others are sort of doing the usual, broadcast shuffle. What's your opinion? Not opinion, but more observations.
I think one of the big lessons that I'm seeing right now is that even when the FCC has declared a phase of this 10-part repack to be over, it's not really over. And so we got through, it's been almost 2 months now since phase 4 ended for us here in the Northeast. It's a month and a half since that wrapped up. And, everybody who needed to move to a new channel for the most part has made it onto their new channels okay. But not everybody is on their final facilities yet because, as everybody had predicted, that supply chain of having enough tower crews, of getting all the equipment where it needed to be at the right time in the right place, everything had to work perfectly. And surprise, surprise, not everything worked perfectly on the days it was supposed to. And so in Boston, for instance, there are a bunch of stations still operating from an interim site because they're not fully up at the new location, because not all the pieces of the combiner are in place yet to be changed over. Here in Rochester, we have 2 stations that are operating from side mount aux antennas at somewhat less than full power because they were all set. Everything was in place. The giant crane was up there to lift the antennas because it's right in the airport flight path, and you couldn't do a helicopter lift. Well, lo and behold, they got their aux antennas switched out to their new channels. And then on night 2, in the overnight, when they were trying to get the big antennas replaced, the motor burned out in the big crane. And it wasn't just a matter of, we'll wait for the motor to be fixed and get back up there, because guess what? That crane was on a schedule and it had to go somewhere else. And so I'm not even sure at this point. One of them is a station that I work with. I'm not even sure when it's going to get its full final transmitter or full final antenna up there. So there's a lot of that going around. New York actually was one of the success stories. And for that, I think all the credit goes to John Lyons up at 4 Times Square, who had every inch of this thing mapped out with his main and auxiliary antennas, and here are actually double main antennas, dual combiners, and he had his whole set of moves to do up there with moving combiner pieces back and forth to get everybody on their right channel. And that worked out beautifully from what I understand for him. But that's been as much the exception as it has been the rule. It's been, it's been a struggle, and now we're in phase 5. I think that's about to wrap up in the Mid-Atlantic. And I think, again, not everybody is going to be done in time, even if they're at least on the channels they're supposed to be on. So it's going to drag a little bit. And I think, any real consideration of ATSC 3, I think everybody wants to get through the phases of this repack first, and then that's going to be more of a story towards the end of this year into 2020 and beyond.
Yeah, I would say the World Trade Center, John Lyons, definitely kudos to his planning and his design early on. If anyone who's worked with him and had the opportunity to see what was going on way back before the repack started with the design of the World Trade Center antenna system, and you looked at what was up there and how it was put together and what it had potential to do, and all he would look at you and says, well, this is all prepared for the repack when that happens. You're like, what? You'll see. And here we are today with the repack. And Scott, you're correct. A lot of shuffling went on, and I was up there with part of the project, and those combiners are not lightweight. That's a lot of heavy metal that has to be swung around and moved. And we had many nights and days where things were just chaotic, but John had a schedule and was able to bring together people and knew exactly where things had to go and did it right. That's why I was curious what you observed, because I talked to some folks across the country who would tell me the same story you did. Like, well, we could if we had this. Well, we could if we could have waited for this. Yeah. But yeah.
But he had an advantage nicely. He had an advantage that so few of us had, which was that this was a building that he had pretty much been designing from scratch with the idea that this was going to be happening within a few years. And most of us haven't had that privilege. The tower that we're dealing with here dates back to 1980, I believe. And there's only so much structurally you could do. You couldn't put 2, let's get rid of unavailable here. Unavailable. You couldn't get rid of, you couldn't have 2 full power antennas mounted up there at once. And so something at some point had to go on an aux. We just didn't expect it was going to be for as long as as it's going to turn out to be. And so there are those challenges all over. The Boston situation is fascinating because it's multiple stations moving on and off different master antennas. They took a candelabra entirely off of a tower there, which was kind of a big deal. I think it was a 6 or 7 phase helicopter lift. And that's been more the norm. I think what John has had in New York, is fantastic, and he's done a phenomenal job with it, but it's also far from the norm, I think, around the country.
That's true, but even to have the opportunity to plan that far ahead is still something I still think it just requires. You got to just sit and talk with them at a AFSCME meeting or an IEEE meeting, and you the stories you hear and the reason, the thinking, it's years ahead of where it was. He did the same thing at Fort Times Square. Even that superstructure was built with the future in mind, and now everybody's moving up there doing stuff. It's like, yeah, you want to plug in? Here you go. You want to put a combiner on? Let's do it. Wideband port done.
Now he is consistently 5 or 6 steps ahead of the rest of us for sure.
Guys, we have reached near the end of our show, but not quite, because in the last little segment, Scott is going to talk about the show title, and that is a stand-up guy, because Scott is a stand-up guy in more ways than one. We're also going to tell you about the calendar. This is my 2019 calendar, which I have enjoyed so far. Let's see, for 8 months, and I've got 4 more months to go, including September. So I'll be getting mine. I want to mention that this calendar, engineers, you should get one. You should support Scott and what he does, and you should get one because it should grace your wall, and you can read about the history of all these different tower sites that Scott puts in here. And here's the idea I really want to pass along to you. Ain't nobody going to get this for you as a gift. If you leave a hint laying around, it's probably not going to happen. You need to go ahead and get it for yourself, and go ahead and get one for an engineering buddy that you like. Instead of some other gift, you're going to get somebody, or maybe somebody on your staff, get them a tower calendar. Because if you're outside of our business, you don't understand this. And you probably, they're not going to get it unless you do it. You as a viewer to the show. So that's my pitch for Scott's tower calendar. I think that's that valuable. Hey, we got to take a quick break. We'll be right back, and with a couple tips of the week, and Scott talking about a stand-up guy. Also, we have a special guest, I understand, who's in studio with Scott. We'll be right back after this word from Lavo.
There has probably never been a better time in history to buy a new radio mixing console. Today's consoles are more sophisticated than ever, with more features and functions than you can shake a stick at. But have you noticed how complicated they are? There's a sea of knobs and switches and displays and buttons. Some of them look like you might need a pilot's license to do your show. Well, a board doesn't have to be complicated to be powerful. Just look at the new Ruby mixing surface from Lavo. The first thing you notice is how smooth and streamlined it is. Ruby has lots of cool tech, but what it doesn't have is that confusing ocean of buttons that clutter things up. Now, we all know that there are some console features the jock only uses once in a while. So why dedicate controls to them? Ruby fixes this problem by moving those once-in-a-blue-moon controls to a touch-sensitive, customizable GUI that happily shares screen space with your other studio software, helping you fight control room clutter. Thanks to this design innovation, talent that use Ruby produce smoother shows with less errors. Controls that are used the most fall naturally to hand, while functions that rarely need adjustment are easily controlled with just a couple of clicks in the context-sensitive GUI. And Ruby has cool features you won't find on other boards, like Auto Mix, an intelligent gain writing function that guarantees the perfect mix for multi-mic morning shows and call-in segments. Dual mode snapshots that instantly switch the motorized faders between on-air and production modes, and enough DSP and I/O options to make even your pro sound pals green with envy. And because quality is as important to Lavo as it is to you, every console is proudly built to fanatically precise standards at Lavo's own factory in Germany. If you're ready to declutter your control room, do yourself a favor. Check out the new Ruby and the other cool Lavo radio tech at www.lawo.com/TWiRT.
Thanks a lot to Lavo for sponsoring this webcast of This Week in Radio Tech. Lavo.com/TWiRT. All right. Hey, we're not done yet, so don't go away. Scott is here and a special guest. Put him on camera. Scott, who's there? Oh, it's Lisa.
Hi, it's me.
Hey, Lisa, how are you?
I'm good.
You look good.
Thank you.
So I've got my 2019 calendar here, and I know that that Chris has his as well. What can I expect in the 2020 calendar?
We actually haven't decided on a cover, so even though we're actually taking suggestions for the cover right now. People who have a favorite area or favorite city should email me, and I might be able to tell them what the cover is. I mean, not tell them what the cover is, take their suggestions for a cover. It's going to have the same photos and history and holidays you expect. I think it's all going to be domestic this year, and there might be a Canadian site, but we didn't really travel outside the States this year. But it will, again, be all across the country and different seasons, different trains, all of that.
I have a picture I could send to you. It's a tower picture you wouldn't get from anybody else because I'm not sure my flight to take a picture of it was entirely legal.
Cool.
But it was a
you've been doing
secret
all
site.
that drone stuff. I want to get into someday.
Yes.
Your pictures are absolutely amazing, and your videos even more so.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks. Well, so to order a catalog, are you want to you taking pre-orders now for catalog?
We are taking pre-orders now. You can go to the site and order it. You can get the 2019 calendar at a really good discount for the last couple of months. And you can get it gift wrapped. I know you mentioned I do know people who have not known about it and have bought it as a gift.
You got to give them the website.
Yes. You go to fybush.com and you can order it there. You can get it gift wrapped. You can add a bag to keep it in forever. And as I said, I do know people who are unfamiliar with radio who still ordered it as a gift, but as you said, best thing to do is to buy one for you and buy one for somebody else.
My feeling on that is if you want one, and of course I do, but if you want one, if you're a listener that wants one of these calendars, you probably know somebody else who wants one too. And Lisa, I'm glad you said some people who aren't in radio buy them as gifts, but that they must have very loving wives and girlfriends to do that.
Yes.
To pay attention to what they want.
And parents have bought them too.
Oh, well, there you go. There you go. All right. So, Lisa,
yes.
I'm sorry. What, Scott?
Makes a great corporate gift too. We have corporate chiefs who'll buy them for all their local engineers, and that's always a popular thing. And we can do bulk orders too.
We can definitely, you can get a discount if you order more than 10.
That's a great idea. Lisa, I understand your husband has a new undertaking, and if he were to be doing his new undertaking and you were introducing him, how would you introduce him?
Well, I would actually have to introduce him as, and now somebody who saw me on stage and decided he had to share in the fun because I'm actually the one who started doing this.
Really?
Back in May.
Oh,
yes.
That was hers. She was doing this first. Yeah.
Really?
So, so I'd have to say somebody who will not ever sit on the sidelines because that's not who he is.
Well, do you ever perform together?
We haven't written an act together yet. We're thinking about it so far. I've got my monologue. He has his monologue.
Chris, I don't know about you, but I'm eager to see at least if I could get a taste. And I know, if you're doing stand-up, and that's the title of the show, Stand-Up Guy. If you're doing stand-up, you can't necessarily just act on command. You've got a monologue. You've got something set up. Scott, is there anything you can do to wet our whistle?
There are some bits that I've worked on because, one of the things, it's a different skill from doing radio, certainly.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some things that kind of translate. And so, as I say at the beginning of one of my sets, I am completely accustomed to standing in a small room talking to myself in front of a microphone. I'm good at that part. The part that I'm not so good at necessarily is seeing the people that I'm talking to. And so sometimes I'll start by turning around and just doing the announcer thing, facing the curtain at the back of the stage. And that's always good for a laugh. And I find if they tell me I got to be off in 5 minutes, I can hit that post and get off in 5 minutes.
That is one advantage to doing a monologue is some people just string together jokes and it's kind of like, okay, what can I fit in here? But we've written our pieces and timed them out. So they are 5 minutes.
Interesting. And so
I will be putting mine on my Facebook page. I will probably be doing mine live on Facebook so people can tune in and see that. I did the last one I did that.
And I've had enough requests for bad radio themed stand up that if I can find a venue, maybe in Vegas in April, we could do some radio stand up. I was
or in Texas.
Yeah, I was tuning that AM transmitter to try to get 50J0 last night, and boy, are my arms tired, right? I know, terrible. It would play with a very small crowd of people who are all the people watching the show right now. So.
Right.
Chris Tobin, every time I try something like that, my audience always has one comment. Keep your day job.
Yeah.
How about you?
I applaud you both. I have a friend of mine who's done stand-up comedy from time to time, and I've been to his gigs, and I have to say that takes a lot of courage. And the two of you, definitely, I can see it working. I've been with Scott in many casual settings with folks, comrades, and there have been times when the lines have come out. I'm like, oh, that's a good one. That's a good singer.
Yeah.
So I could just imagine, Lisa, you probably definitely have that other side that would make the two of you complement each other. I'd love to see you on stage.
She's got a great routine.
together.
She's got a couple of them, actually.
Yeah.
So where are you performing?
I wrote too that it's like, okay, now I just have to put this down until winter, and one has to be held until spring because of the time sensitive material.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Scott, where are you performing?
Actually hitting some open mics around town. And I got to say, I mean, in all honesty, both of us, me especially, we're just dabbling in this.
Yeah.
And there is a serious scene, at least here in Rochester, and I know in other cities too, where people go out and they do this pretty seriously every night. And so, like I say to them, there's kind of a democratization of this. There's a whole debate going on with some of the professional comedians in town about, are these open mic guys really comedians? And my argument, which I think has some radio relevance, is, hey, anybody now can go and do an hour on the radio at one of our 6 different LPFM stations here in town.
Yes.
Does it make them a radio professional? Well, not exactly. Okay, you guys who are up there doing stand-up, can you hit every post doing 5 hours a morning edition on your NPR station? Probably not. So we all have our skill sets. But I'm going to be hitting one of the open mics here in town tonight. I think, Chris, when I'm in New York for the NAB and AES, there's a friend of mine down there who actually was one of my radio buddies in college, who's been doing a lot of it down there, and he's promised to get me out to one down there. So follow me on Facebook. You might get to see a few of these now and again.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah, I'd love to. Hey, we got to go in almost a minute. Scott, I'll give if you have a quick tip for us, great. I wouldn't want to close out without giving you an opportunity.
Quick tip, if you have a translator and you are having interference issues and you haven't looked yet at whether these new rules can let you move to a new channel, you have opportunities you might not know about, and get in touch with one of the consultants who could do it, like me, for instance, at Fybush Media, and you may have some new opportunities that didn't exist just a couple of months ago.
And I wasn't aware of this until yesterday, or I guess it was yesterday or this morning. Anyway, Scott, you're also brokering broadcast facilities now.
Yes, I am. I am a proud member of the National Association of Media Brokers, and I have my shingle out at stationsale.com, and a couple of listings there and a couple more that will be coming along soon. So if you need an AM and a translator in Providence, I am your man.
Good deal. Good deal. Lisa, good to see you. Scott, thanks for joining us. Real quick, Chris, did you have anything quick to pass along to us?
Real quick, the tip of the week will be with Hurricane Dorian coming through the coastline and wreaking havoc. We as broadcasters who have been considered along the lines with first responders and keeping our communities in touch, it's time to check your systems, your emergency preparedness systems, generators, lights. Make sure when your generator goes on that the exhaust fan and louvers are actually on the generator circuit, not the utility side. Make sure you have lights in the building that are actually on generator circuits, not utility. Make sure you have outlets that have been designated generators so you know where to plug in or not to overload the circuit. So this is a good time to just look up your systems and say, hey, what do we have for broadcast continuity planning, and go with that.
Good deal. And I've got a quick tip, and that is we have a new sponsor coming on next week. But I'll go ahead and give you the tip as if they weren't a sponsor, because I would anyway. And that is from Bone, that's BOHN, Bone Broadcast Services, Bone Broadcast Inc., the Max Connect product. And you've heard us talk about that before. It's MAXXKONNECT, Max Connect. And I think maxconnect.com is the website. But it's a product, it's a data modem. That it's an ordinary off-the-shelf data modem, but the service that it connects to is basically guaranteed bandwidth. You can be in this whole stadium of people, and they're all checking their phones and not getting their data as fast as they should. And you, the broadcaster, you doing your remote broadcast with Max Connect will get the data that you expect. It's just amazing. And Chris and I will be using Max Connect boxes as we broadcast from outside of our usual offices and locations. So, Chris, it may be time to hang up the ketchup bottle and do a Max Connect.
That's fine. The ketchup bottle is just a mount. I could place a 5G antenna on that. That's not a problem.
Yeah.
4G, I should say. 4G antenna. Yeah. Matter of fact, speaking of Max Connect, I actually had lunch today with a friend of mine who has a Max Connect product and has been using it for his sports podcast and is quite impressed with it.
We used it at the SBE convention or meeting at the NAB show in Las Vegas, and we streamed video over it. And hey, on my phone, I was getting huge data, wonderful. And then when it came to actually put video through it, didn't work so well. There was a lot of holes in it. But the Max Connect tested out at a lower speed. But you know what? We got every packet of that just went through. It was just beautiful. So that's coming up. We'll have more details on that, and we'll be showing it because we'll be using it on some of our upcoming broadcasts. All right, we got to go. Hey, big thanks to Scott and Lisa Fybush. Thanks for joining us, kids. Really appreciate you being here.
Pleasure.
And Fybush.com is the main place to go for Scott and Lisa's stuff. Chris Tobin is here. Chris is at WBGO in Newark. Chris, thank you for being with us. Appreciate it. And then also our producer is Suncast. Suncast, thank you so much for producing the show. We really appreciate you as well. We got a lot of good shows coming up, including a live show from the NAB radio show in Dallas. I'll be live there in the booth of Broadcaster General Store. Grady Moats is up in a week or so, and we have just lots more coming up. So I hope you'll stay tuned. Tell your friends about This Week in Radio Tech and join us. Thanks again to Andrew Zarian, also the founder of the GFQ Network. We'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye.